I'm Dr. Tracy Stecker, and welcome to the Choosing Help podcast. Choosing Help presents conversations about courage, connection, and the transformative power of asking for support. Through candid discussions, expert insights, and real-world stories, this podcast breaks down stigma and opens doors to understanding. Join our community committed to compassion and courage, because when we choose help, we choose life. I'm Dr. Tracy Stecker, and I'm joined today by Dr. Robert Neimeyer. Dr. Neimeyer is a professor at the University of Memphis and also the director of the Portland Institute for Loss and Transition. He is widely published. He's published, I think it was over 600 manuscripts and 37 books on grief, and is widely known as a leading expert in the field of grief and grief therapy. And I'm very honored to have you join us here today.
Thank you, Tracy, for the invitation. I look forward to the dialogue. I should give one just minor, maybe correction, and that
Okay,
is that
good.
I'm no longer a professor at the University of Memphis,
Okay.
except in the sense that I'm an emeritus professor, which means an honored old guy who has retired. But I remain very active outside the walls of that institution in
That's
research and practice as a grief therapist.
well, that's awesome, and congratulations on your retirement from that role, but you are not retired from your work as the director of the Institute.
Not even close.
And I think we can all understand why. So, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you here today was to talk about grief. My work has always been focused on individuals who are outside of systems of care. They're
Mm,
resisting help, they're resisting coming in,
mm.
or their families are really urging them to come in and they're at a loss. What else can I do to help this person seek help? And I thought it would be really good, wise to have somebody who is an expert on grief come in and talk about grief. Grief is something that, even though every one of us is going to experience it many, many, many times in our life,
Yeah.
no matter what, there's no getting out of jail card free card here. We are all going to experience grief in multiple ways, multiple times in our life. I do think when I say we, um, I'm generalizing, maybe not everybody, but in general, we still kind of look at that as I don't want to. I'm not going to. Nope. I'm not going to feel that. I'm not going to go through that. Or I'll handle it okay, not really prepared for how it might feel, depending on who it is that or what it is that you lose. So I wanted to start by just talking about preparing for grief and that experience of grief. Is it possible to prepare or to practice grief?
Well, in some measure, I suppose it is. And I like the way that you framed the initial question and the kind of general setting of the stage for that, because you used the phrase that families are at a loss. And they may be dealing with someone who is struggling with addiction, with substance abuse, maybe resisting treatment. Um, and what I'd like to do is to really take that phrase of yours, at a loss, quite seriously, and to
Mhm.
recognize that the losses that occur in the context of a whole life trajectory shared with one or more people in the family who have struggles with substances uh, confront us with many, many losses. And many of them are non-death losses. They're a
Mhm.
loss of a sense of security, sometimes financial security. It may be a loss of basic world assumptions about life being just or fair, uh,
Yeah.
our being able to control ourselves, our behaviors, our loved ones, protecting them from harm or self-harm. We may lose a sense of life as it should have been, a
Yeah.
loss of dreams, ideals, and ultimately, of course, often a loss of persons. as that occurs in the context of estrangement of family relations or the actual death of people. And of course, we know that both of those are outcomes that are increased in frequency and incidence by lives that are saturated with alcohol or other drugs. So I want to take seriously this idea that grief and grief therapy is something much larger than simply what happens in the immediate weeks or months following the death of a loved one, although
Mm-hmm.
it, of course, takes place there as well.
Mm-hmm.
As you're suggesting, we live in anticipation of such losses. We also live with a history of them, and not necessarily a history that we've accommodated very well.
Mm-hmm.
Many of us are still wounded by the losses that we carry of people, places, projects, possessions, possibilities that we
Mm-hmm.
once cherished and they gave meaning to our lives. And now we find ourselves again and again and again across the course of lives needing to adapt to the very unwelcome changes and transitions that loss introduces us to. So I'd like us to be able to focus on the center of that bullseye in terms of the loss of loved ones to death. That's certainly a huge existential challenge for any of us. Uh, but I'd also like to look at the broader rings on that target uh,
Mm-hmm.
that encompass a variety of losses of relationships, health, uh, careers, possibilities, uh,
Mm-hmm.
a sense of family. All of these can take a heavy hit across
Mm-hmm.
the course of life, and all of them may call for attention to grief. Probably the simplest response that, and we can certainly unpack this in more detail, but the simplest response to your question of can we prepare for loss is yes, and we do it by living well. We do it by living consciously. We do it by living in a way that accumulates few regrets about how, we might have done it differently.
Mm-hmm.
We do it by learning the lessons of loss across a series of losses people, places, possessions, pets across time, we can get more skillful in a way at accommodating loss. And we learn to somehow adapt to the circumstances of living in the shadow of what we once had, but
Mm-hmm.
still finding a life that's meaningful. And that often entails also reconstructing a sense of connection to the very person who died in the case of bereavement. So all of that and more is open for discussion in the context of our conversation today.
Yeah. So, I almost heard something very Buddhist, but I heard, and then please fix whatever I'm about to say. But I heard one way to accept loss, which is constant, um, every every day we're losing something. We lost the day, or we lost yesterday. In a way, to accept loss is to also accept that we're living right now. Whatever we're doing right now, live fully, and that aspect helps us handle loss.
I strongly endorse that idea.
Okay.
Um, we can hold the past, both the cherished and the painful past, more securely if we can stand in the present moment in fullness.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that is what prepares us to enter that hypothetical state that we call the future,
Hmm.
with a greater sense of appreciation and openness to what comes. I think also another Buddhist theme that we could introduce here would be the existential reality that as human beings, we are wired for attachment in a
Hmm.
world of impermanence.
Hmm.
We attach to people, places, and things, and yet over the course of our lives, we will lose everyone and everything we loved,
Hmm.
at least in an earthly sense. And so preparing for that is a life project. It's not a simple cognitive trick uh,
Right.
or a way of consoling ourselves when bad things happen, um, though it may involve cognitive and consoling practices.
Yeah.
But it's a bigger task.
Yeah. Uh, when would you say, I'm sort of jumping here, and I don't mean to, but I do feel like I'm taking a big jump. When would you say that grief had become problematic? When is grief, which is something we're experiencing, potentially all the time, more or less,
Mhm.
when would you say that it's become problematic for an individual?
Well, to say it simply, but in an empirically informed way and also a clinically meaningful way, when it impairs us,
Mm-hmm.
when it impairs our functioning, meaning when we find that we are unable to show up for our partners because we're so preoccupied with the loss of our child,
Mm-hmm.
um, unable to get food on the table for the kids or to get them to school or soccer on time uh, because we're so concerned and preoccupied with the loss of a partner.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when we find ourselves pulling back and away from people because we're concerned about further loss, and we know that investing in relationships can bring deeper pain.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when we find ourselves disorganized by grief, to a point that we can't function in the workplace, in the home, when we find ourselves withdrawing from important relationships, seeking a kind of um, solace in aloneness because we just don't feel we have the energy or we can't manage the grief attacks that come to us um, when we're in the presence of others. So all of these things share the common denominator of when grief reaches a level of intensity and persistence that begins to handicap us in major life roles
Mm-hmm.
and unravel that thread of intention that leads to important purposes and goals when we find ourselves stuck in a kind of anguish about a past we once had, but no longer can have, at least in a literal sense. When we experience preoccupying yearning for the one who died,
Mm-hmm.
wanting them back in the old way they were with us at the dinner table or in our bed, or and and when we find ourselves unable to kind of rework the relationship with them to carry it forward in the ways we now can as a continuing bond that we can continue to draw upon as a source of support and self-understanding, maybe even practicing imaginal dialogues with the loved one about the events of our life, imagining what they would advise us as we confront certain challenges. There are many ways in which we can adaptively respond to the reality of even quite tragic loss.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one thing we know is that avoidance of the grief, avoidance of the loss, um, leaves us very handicapped because we
Yeah.
will never master that which we avoid. So the art of grieving is finding a safe enough way, often with accompaniment, to move toward that which we would otherwise move away from,
Mm-hmm.
and to come to, to be able um, to deal with it, to inhabit it, to acknowledge it, um, to regulate our emotions in relation to it, which doesn't mean suppressing them, but
Right.
it means coming to tolerate a greater range of discomfort and anxiety, uncertainty, um, and to become more skillful at managing that.
And so that can clearly happen when there's been a loss of a loved one. But I'm actually even hearing that could happen to somebody to protect themselves from having the loss of a loved one. They might be so protecting themselves from that experience that they sort of isolate and push away.
Exactly.
They
And
don't
this
want to get close.
That's right. And this raises the whole issue of our attachment styles. John Bowlby and many others after him in the tradition of research on both child and adult attachment recognized that we are, of course, wired to connect to others, in a primordial way, a basic way. Parents, right, provide that sense of attachment and connection, bonding to their children. Um, their caregiving bond meets the attachment needs of the child. They provide a sense of security, kind of mirroring, hearing, and listening to that child, helping them feel secure in the world. And these secure-based relationships then provide the foundation for all that we do going forward, all we become. However, when the experiences we have in these relationships are marked by abandonment, neglect, abuse, then in all of these cases, we rightly develop a working model, an idea about how relationships are that lead us to avoid, to practice a rigorous kind of compulsive uh, you know,
Protection.
self-regulation and
Yeah.
self-care, and
Yeah.
to minimize our connection with others. So when we're working with grief, we are also working with the very heart of human relationships and the problematic ways that people have come to accommodate them and to accommodate the difficult emotions that can arise in those relationships. So if we begin in any therapy to just pull on the thread of loss, we'll find a lot comes with that, including their attachment style, their current conflicts, their patterns of defense against troubling emotions and relations.
Yeah.
And so, in some ways, again, I see loss and grief as important in shaping who we are, who we become, um, whose we are, and how we
Hmm.
connect. Uh,
Yeah.
all of these essential features of living.
Yeah. So even just to summarize where we're at so far, um, grief is not just the loss when you lose somebody at the end of life. It is an experience we are experiencing uh, constantly. Maybe it might be an old wound, but constantly. And so um, part of part of accepting loss and having a healthy experience with grief is living fully, but also, um, I lost my trail. I
That's
lost my
okay. That's
trail
just
there.
another form of loss.
Yeah,
Uh,
my brain went. I
well,
wanted to go one place and I forgot where I was going.
well, of course, that happens to us all, and conversations don't have to be scripted. You
Yeah,
and I exchange no questions at the outset. Everything we're saying is a real conversation of a
yeah,
spontaneous
spontaneous.
sort. Um,
Yeah, but what I'm learning though is that if it becomes problematic for somebody, if there is a loss, regardless of it's a death or some other type of loss, if it is a loss that that particular individual, who they are and what they lost and how they lost it maybe was so profound that it impacted their functioning, um, the work that might need to be done is pretty intense because it is going back to who they are,
right.
how they look at life, how they learned attachments. Really pretty, and it could be potentially pretty extensive uh, work in
It could
therapy.
be, but it need not be.
Okay.
I want to emphasize that, and again, this would be something that is backed up by considerable research, most especially by George Bonanno and his group at Teachers College in New York, um, which demonstrates that people are actually pretty resilient. The majority of people who experience even the death of a family member,
Mhm.
um, are within weeks, they're able to function again, pretty normally. And that isn't to say that they don't continue to hurt and grieve,
Right.
grieve that loss. but not to a degree that it undercuts their ability to live, to maintain close relations, um, to project goals and move toward them. What we find is that only about 10% of bereaved people experience a kind of chronic and preoccupying form of loss that's now recognized by
Okay.
the American Psychiatric Association and the World Health Organization as prolonged grief disorder, where
Okay.
people across a period of 6 months for the World Health Organization, or 12 months, a year or more, for the American Psychiatric Association, where people are really unable to function, that they are their lives are reduced um, to to a place that just isn't working by
Mm-hmm.
their grief. Now, this is not to say in any way, and I want to be very clear about this, that grieving is something that should be done with in 6 months or a year. If we lose a child,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a lifetime experience in some way.
Mm-hmm.
If we lose a partner, if we experience a traumatic loss, we may carry the heaviness of that for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is not in some way to eliminate the grief, it's to become stronger and more able to bear it, um, more able to put it in perspective, to find meaning in our life experience, meaning in our future, as well as in our past. Um, and it could be helpful for us to spend a few minutes talking about what shapes our grieving and what that implies for self and other care and for potential grief therapy.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
The- One window on this is a kind of three-part model that we use as we talk about meaning-focused approaches to grief. And that is recognizing that how we grieve is a function of three things: who we are, who
Mm-hmm.
we lose, and
Mm-hmm.
how we lose them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And difficulties in accommodating grief can arise in any of those areas.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at how we lose people, the story of the dying itself, this can introduce lots of complications. My father, for example, died when I was 11 by suicide in the course of encroaching blindness, probably financial ruin, maybe difficulties with my mother that I was too young to understand at the age of 11. Um, and so that would represent one traumatic death experience: suicide, violent death, sudden death, natural disaster.
Mm-hmm.
All of these bring with it an element of the horrific. Um, we have trouble, of course, um, uh, accommodating it. We tend to fluctuate between a kind of immersive flashback to the scene of the dying as we witnessed it or as we imagined it equally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we move into avoidance of those images because they're so triggering. So, in the context of grief work, we sometimes require a trauma-informed approach
Mm-hmm.
that helps people safely re-enter the story of what they've experienced, that they're often carrying very privately in their own heart and head because they don't want to burden others with it, and they can hardly find the words for it themselves. And we help them find the words, we help them piece together the jigsaw puzzle of what happened. We do it in a way that's very attentive to their level of emotion in the room. That is, we try to keep it within their window of tolerance. That doesn't mean we don't uh, generously receive tears, but if the person breaks down in incoherent sobbing, we find
Yeah.
ways to ground them again, um, through breath work, through sensory grounding, through other practices that help settle that. And then we move forward with the story. And
Yeah.
across maybe a period of several sessions, we help them speak the silent story of what they have lost in the witnessing presence and support of others, us, maybe a group, maybe a family. That's trauma-informed care.
Mm-hmm.
At other times, we're struggling not with the story of the loss, but the story of the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And most particularly in the context of addiction and substance use, we often have very troubled histories, a lot of conflict, a lot of disappointment, a lot of promises made and broken, um, a lot of chaos, a lot of anger, um, a lot of unfinished business, as we call it, and as we study it, um, which can include, as we find in our research, both a sense of unfulfilled wishes in connection with that relationship or that person, and also unresolved conflict. We need to find some way then, when the person is living or even after they have died, and we continue to carry the bad feelings about these things with us. We need to find some ways to reopen the relationship rather than to seek closure of it.
Mm-hmm.
Reopen it for a kind of symbolic dialogue with the deceased in a way that allows us to address and ultimately redress, resolve
Yeah.
some of the unfinished work,
Yeah.
unresolved relational issues. So the course of grieving then needs to be attachment informed. It needs to pay attention to how we move from often loving another in presence, even ambivalently, and loving them in absence. How do we continue a sense of bond or connection that doesn't require the physical presence of the person?
Yeah.
That's a second piece. And the third piece is the story of who we are, who we have been, who we are now, who we're becoming. And if I go back to that experience of my dad's suicide,
Mm-hmm.
I was the youngest of three kids. I was the oldest of three kids. My younger brother and sister, of course, were as impacted by dad's death as I was. And our mother was a total mess. She was wrecked by the experience. And within a week of his dying, she sat us down and she said, "Bobby, you need to be the little man in the family now."
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had just blown out the candles on my 12th birthday cake,
Mm-hmm.
and I was not prepared for manhood, but I adapted. Um, and this is true regardless of the age or relationship of the bereaved person. Um, when we lose someone cardinal in our life, someone whose heartstrings are tied to ours very directly, we are changed by the experience. We're not the same person
Mm-hmm.
we were before. And as a friend of mine, Tom Attig, says, grieving then entails relearning the self and relearning the world, because both are challenged and changed by this passage. So the process of really rewriting our self in
Yeah.
bereavement becomes a consideration. That may imply specific tasks. Some of them involve actual writing. Um, as we try to figure out, who are we now? Where are we going now? Um, what changes are made necessary and made possible by this loss?
Yeah.
Um, so all these are three domains then around the event itself, around the relationship, and around our identities as survivors, where people often benefit from companionship and support,
Mm-hmm.
where we receive greater support than "I'm sorry for your loss,"
Yeah.
um, but people who are really willing and able to delve into it with us.
All right. Really important stuff you just said. A lot of really important stuff. Here's what I heard. Three things are important: who you are as an individual, who you've lost or what you've lost, and then how the loss happened. And then, in addition to that, um, the process of grief, if I understand that right, it's making sense of what happened,
Yeah.
if so, meaning making. If it was a traumatic event, for example, or something that just doesn't make sense, trying to come to terms with what just happened. So meaning making, um, recreating a relationship with
Uh-huh.
the the loved one or the lost thing, um,
Uh-huh.
having whatever the relationship was, you still have a relationship, but it's changed. And
Mhm.
so learning what it is now, which can take some time, and thinking through. And so not just thinking through, the third thing was not just thinking through the relationship, but who am I now? So you started as this person, but now who are you? You've changed.
Mhm.
The the love that you had, even though the loved one's not there, the love is still there, but you have changed with the loss of that
Well,
person. So who are you now? Did I
I
get
think
that
she's
right?
got it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a beautiful summary.
Okay.
Yeah, that is,
Yeah.
and you can begin to see then that grieving is about much more than toughing it out. It's much more than even finding ways to console or comfort ourselves or others, though, of course, that is important. But we are engaged without ever requesting it in a process of rebuilding, rebuilding a world, rebuilding a sense of family, rebuilding a sense of self, and rebuilding our relationship with the significant person.
Hmm.
Um,
And with self. Yeah.
that's right. And
Yeah.
so all of the above, rebuilding our assumptions about the world. Maybe
Yeah.
we learned that, the world is more random or cruel than we imagined.
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
we accommodate that reality? Um,
Yeah, so even one person, so I'll use you for an example. You had a very traumatic loss at age 11 of a key person in your life, your father, in a traumatic way, which impacted your family functioning significantly, and your functioning significantly, your resilience. So you obviously became the leading expert on grief. You you definitely
Well,
embrace that.
it's a generous assessment, but it was done by degrees if I did it at all. And it continues to be, a lifelong project.
Yeah.
And that's a piece that I think is worth underscoring, that those of us who do this work as therapists are
Hmm.
commonly led to it by losses of our own.
Yeah.
And the crucial thing is to allow that to cultivate um, our wisdom about the experience of loss, the gravity of it, but with the key caveat that the losses that people bring to us will be importantly different than ours.
Mhm.
There are elements that are universal in loss, but there are many that are distinct to the person, the relationship, the manner of dying, and the resources and vulnerabilities that the client brings. Those resources include their spiritual or secular philosophic framework. They include the network of relations within the family and beyond it. They include the cultural practices that accommodate loss. Um, and so we need to artfully draw upon all of these. Um, in, in some way, every therapy is different than every other therapy, even though there are common themes and some practices that can be helpful. But we always have to begin with where the client is, not with where we are.
Right. And so for somebody listening who um maybe at some point in their life experienced a very significant loss, and they're listening and they're kind of thinking about that loss, and I kind of did that. I had to make sense of what happened. I did have to rebuild an identity with myself, and maybe rebuild how I think about that person, what the relationship is now, or even I don't know that I did that step. Um, I don't think you're saying everybody needs to go to therapy if they're
Oh, no, no.
experiencing grief, but I think this whole process of understanding grief and allowing it to happen, and even going back to what you're saying, loss and love are intricately related. We're experiencing them every day, and so you can't have one without the other,
Well said.
and even just acknowledging that that's happening for us, all of us,
That's right.
right now.
That's right. So it all begins with acknowledgement, and that acknowledgement need not be on the part of a therapist.
Yeah.
Again, I think 10% of bereaved people might benefit from therapy. Um, what we know is that if you think about a public health model of grief, a public health pyramid, the base
Hmm.
of the pyramid really defines about 60% of the population that will do just fine
Right.
if they are met with care, compassion, patience on the part of a grief literate society.
Yeah.
We recognize what's entailed with it. We're able to provide support. That casserole on the front porch, followed by a text that we dropped off dinner for the family.
Yeah.
Um, this may be all that people need, along with a kind of listening ear that we would extend to friends or others we love who are going through a difficult time.
Yeah.
30% of the people then beyond this 60 apparently benefit from some form of enhanced support.
Okay.
Maybe they go on the internet and they seek out sources or books or uh, other resources that are helpful in
Hmm.
accommodating grief. Maybe they join an online community of
Hmm.
widows or single people who are
Survivors.
yeah,
Yeah.
contending with raising their children, or maybe they're adolescents who are trying to deal with the loss of a parent or sibling. Um, or maybe they're attending an on-site mutual support group at a local hospice or elsewhere in their community. Um, and then there's the 10% that is more a clinical group where they really are rendered, um, almost frozen by the grief, or in a
Hmm.
place of such anguish that does not abate across time,
Hmm.
um, to a place that professional help is really called for. Uh,
Hmm.
and of course, this will occur with greater frequency when those lives and families are saturated with the many challenges of drug use or addiction,
Yeah.
um, where some professional support is may become all the more important.
Right,
Um,
because the grief is complicated. It
yeah,
very
and
complicated.
and the thing about human beings is we're quite capable of having more than one problem at a time, aren't we? And sometimes these things compound themselves, right? People
Right.
cope with their grief in part by turning to
Yeah.
substances to regulate emotions that they don't understand or can't
Which
address.
causes more grief. Yeah.
That's right. And it becomes a cycle, doesn't it?
Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking about, I just hadn't conceptualized it this way at all. But when I lost my father, I was older than 11. But I vividly remember crying for 5 days. And at day five, I had this thought. I need to look at myself in the mirror because I bet I look so ugly. I was picturing a red face and puffy eyes and I just was scared to look in the mirror. I just had this thought, look, you better look at yourself because you are probably a mess. I cried for 5 days. I'd lost my father and I looked in the mirror. And one of the things that I had been thinking those 5 days was, how am I going to have a relationship with you now? How can I have a relationship with you gone? Where are you? Where are you? So I looked in the mirror to see this, what I thought was going to be this hideous, ugly, puffy, red face. I look in the mirror and who's looking back at me but my father? He was right there. I
Wow.
looked a
Wow.
lot like him. I looked in the mirror. I was just expecting, just had this thought, you are going to look so puffy and ugly. I
Mm,
looked and I had been, for 5 days, where are you? How am I going to do this? How am I going to have this relationship? I looked in the mirror and I was like, there you are. You're right
yeah.
here. You're
Yeah.
right here. And it was
You're right.
that moment happened to be very healing for me. At
Yes.
the moment, I wasn't looking for it. In fact, I was looking for ugly, but accidentally found it. And it happened to be a sort of a moment for me because, moving forward, whenever I need my dad, I just talk to myself. He's right here. I am
Yeah.
my dad. My dad is me. We're we were connected. He's my father.
That's really beautiful. And of course, this is one of the major ways in which we solve that dilemma as we recognize that this difference between self and other is kind of a fantasy, an illusion, that
Yeah.
they permeate us. We carry them in us. I
Hmm.
mean, in a literal sense, 50% of your genetics is your father.
Hmm.
Where else does he live now save in you? Um, and you could probably trace all of the ways that he has shaped you, that you have taken in something of him, whether it's his gestures, his mannerisms, his expressions, his ways of speaking, thinking, perhaps some of his core values, some of his pastimes um, also shape you. Um, the way you live out relationships is partly in response to how you live the relationship with him. In
Hmm.
all of these ways, he hasn't gone away. He's just
Yeah.
gone inside.
Yeah.
And now you are a place in which he's living in the world.
And
Um,
it's interesting because you do hear that a lot when you lose somebody you love. You hear they're still here. They're still here with you. And you can hear those words, but until you really grasp it, and it's
uh,
going to be different with every
absolutely.
individual. I mean, that was my father, and I do look just like him,
Yeah,
but it's going to be different with each individual. And I know that people are intending that to be a kind statement. They're still here. But it really is until you feel it or realize it or grasp it in some ways. It's that individual has to realize,
that's
wait,
right. And
I'm
that's why
still.
in therapy, I may find myself asking questions along these lines, like, um, what do you carry with you or
Mhm.
in you that has abiding value as a gift from this person?
Oh, nice.
Um, and in what ways do they continue to find expression in the world through you? Um, what difference do you want their presence in your life to continue to make?
Mm,
Um, if you were to consider what they have taught you about
mm,
living or loving, what would some of those lessons be
mhm.
that have continued relevance for your life now? Um, if you were to make one promise to them about a step that you would take now that they would applaud and celebrate, what would that promise be? What would that step be? And
I
so,
really like that. Yeah.
yeah. So all of this has to do with fostering post-loss growth
Hmm.
that is similar to but different from post-traumatic growth.
Hmm.
Post-traumatic growth can arise in relation to any difficult event that we ultimately surmount. But this has to do specifically with that attachment relationship to the other.
Yeah.
How does it energize who we become? And
Yeah.
so at the end of the day, as serious as grief is, and I've accompanied thousands of bereaved people with horrific losses. I wrote a whole book about this called Living Beyond Loss, questions and answers about grief and bereavement from 100 bereaved people, really difficult losses of central people in their lives. And one thing that it taught me is the extent to which people are able to grow through grief, not just go through grief, but to develop into something even more remarkable as a function of the lessons that they learn and live in the course of grieving. So for me, that's the ultimate take-home message of grief. It's a call to consciousness.
Mm.
It's an opportunity to learn. Um, and it's the lesson, it's the school we wished we never had to enroll in,
Yeah.
uh, but
Yeah.
we had to. And so
Yeah.
the question is, what do we do with this now?
Oh, I absolutely love that. So what do you carry with you from this person? Because it might be a beautiful thing, like, oh, they lived life to the fullest, for example. But it might be, I know that I will never function like they did. It doesn't have to be this positive thing you carry, but you're
Oh,
still
yeah,
carrying them forward.
right. I mean, maybe what I learn is the importance of boundaries.
Hmm.
Maybe what I learn is the reality of human imperfection, my
Hmm.
own and the others. So lessons can be equally valuable if they are ambivalent.
Yeah. Living beyond grief
Living
is
beyond loss,
living beyond loss.
questions and answers about grief and bereavement. And
Well,
I can send
and
you a flyer on that if you want to
please,
inform
yeah,
people about it. It's an
yes.
inexpensive paperback I just published last year.
Oh, yeah, Living Beyond Loss. I'm definitely going to read it. I recommend anybody listening to read it. This has been such an interesting discussion on grief. I've learned a lot from you. I honestly feel like I could talk to you for a lot longer, which is why I'm definitely going to read this book and recommending people to read this book because you exposed me to a different perception than I had before we started talking. And I like that. I like that a lot. Just the idea that grief is with us always. So then there's nothing to fear because it's always with us. It's life. It's the same exact thing. You just flip that over and you're either living or you're grieving, but it's the same exact thing depending on how you're looking at
Yes,
it.
and none of that makes it any easier. I want to
Right,
really underscore that. This is not saying that there's some kind of a simple flip that we can take and then it's all right. It's
right.
fine that our child died of a neuroblastoma or that our uh, partner wasted away to dementia or that a vehicular accident took the life of our sibling. None of that is okay, but all of it is reality for many people. And so the
Absolutely.
question is, how do we meet that moment in a way that goes beyond simply saying they're there, time will heal all wounds. Uh, we know that time doesn't heal. It's a question of what people do at the time that counts. And
Hmm.
so, whether we are family members, whether we are working on ourselves and our own losses, or whether we're consulting a therapist, the goal would be to ask, what active, reflective steps can I take um, to help me learn something more of value in the context of this loss, and then live it in the world.
Hmm. Yes. What more can I learn? What can I carry forward? Living Beyond Loss, Dr. Robert Neimeyer. He's amazing. Thank you for being here. I kept him way longer than I told him I would keep him today, so I'm gonna go ahead and set him free now. But thank you so much for this conversation. For more information, if you want to learn more about his work, you can consult his website, the Portland Institute for Loss and Transition. Or you can come to our website at choosinghelp.com and we will have information about him there as well. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tracy. It's a great pleasure. I appreciate it. Bye now.